How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Ayin Tes, Daf 79 of Masechta Gittin. Friends, we're one daf away from Daf 80. The whole Masechta Gittin only goes up to Daf 90, so we're really getting close, friends. We're really getting close. All right, we're going to start with we're going to learn today two Mishnayos. The first one talks a shtickle like Masechta Shabbos-y kind of things, but all right, it ain't too bad. And then we get to another Mishnah towards the end, pretty straightforward Mishnah. So, let's do it. Alright, Zog the Mishnah on the top of Ayin Tes Amud Aleph. Hoysa Omedes al Rosh Hagag. If she is standing on top of the roof, Uzrako La, and the husband throws the get up to her on the roof. Kevin Shigir La Over Agag. Once the get, I guess maybe makes up as a paper airplane, he throws it up and it lands on the roof. Once the get, reaches the airspace of the roof, Harezo Migoreshes, she's divorced. Humi Lamaila, if it's fakert, if he is on the roof, Vihi Milmata, and she's below in the courtyard surrounding the roof, surrounding the house, Vizarkola, and he throws the get to her, Kimchiyot Mirshus Agag. Once it leaves the roof and it's on its way down, then even if Nimchak or Nisraf, if it got erased somehow, maybe it started raining, ich weiß nicht, or Nisraf, or it got burnt somehow, a fire stuck out of one of the windows, ich weiß nicht, Harezo Migoreshes, once the get leaves the roof to go down to the chotzer, she's immediately divorced. Says the Gemara, Balu Minter, ho. Frag the Gemara, how could it be that if he's down below in the courtyard and he throws the get up to the roof, once it reaches the airspace of the roof, she's already divorced? How could that be? Meaning it hasn't landed on the roof yet. So at that point, can't the wind just kind of come and blow and it will never have landed on the roof? In which case, how could she be divorced? Like, there's definitely a potential that it could just blow away and never end up landing on the roof. So how could she be divorced once immediately once it gets into the airspace? That shouldn't be enough. So Rav Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel that we're talking about a roof that has a fence around it. So once it gets into the airspace of the roof within the borders of the fence, well then it's not going to blow out anymore because the fence will stop it. So Ula Bar Menashe B'Shmei Davimi Yomer Alcha B'Pachos Mishlosha Samach Legag Askin, and he gives a different answer that it landed within 3 tfachim of the floor of the roof. The Chopachos Mishlosha Samach Legag Kegagdami. Of course, we know about the halacha of lavud, that anything within 3 tfachim is considered lavud. It's considered connected to the ground, and therefore that is why she would be divorced at that point because once it's within 3 tfachim of the roof, it's already considered like it landed on the roof, and therefore she's divorced. Now, if it's fakert, if he's on the roof and he throws the get down to the courtyard below where she is, valo minter, but I don't understand. Same kasha. If he throws the get right off the roof down to the courtyard, I mean, what's preventing the wind from just blowing it? The wind blows, and all of a sudden it doesn't land in the courtyard; it lands 3 blocks away. So why is she divorced? Well, Rav Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel, for example, that, it's talking about where the walls of the courtyard were very high. You know how high the walls of the courtyard were? Higher than the roof. And therefore, when he throws it off the roof, there's no chance of a wind blowing it 3 blocks away because there are already walls there. So therefore, you don't have to worry about it blowing 3 blocks away. It's definitely going to land in the courtyard. V'chein Amar Elazar, Amar Boshai, ki gon shoy mechitzos hatachtonis, od fesel yonis. So Eichet Elazar Amar Boshai says the Zel Bazach that's talking about where the walls of the chotzer are taller than the roof that's in the chotzer. V'chein Amar Ula Amar B'Yechanan, ki gon shoy mechitzos hatachtonis, od fesel yonis. And Eichet Ula says the name of Rabbi Yechanan Zel Bazach that the walls of the chotzer are taller than the roof, than the house. Amar le Reb Abba le'ula. Reb Abba says to Ula, "Come on, Kirebi, ho 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 ho." So Rabbi Abba says to Ula, so it sounds like this is like Rebbe. Who says that once something reaches into the air, it goes into airspace, it's like it landed there. Right? The example is, Masechta Shabbos, if you throw something from one Rishus HaYachid, from one Rishus HaRabim to another Rishus HaRabim, and there's a Rishus HaYachid in the middle, so then even if it doesn't land, right, you throw a tennis ball from one Rishus HaRabim to another Rishus HaRabim, there's a Rishus HaYachid in the middle, so even if it doesn't land in the Rishus HaYachid, it doesn't matter. That once it is in the airspace, it's like it landed there, and therefore you're chayiv for going from Rishus HaRabim to Rishus HaYachid. So let's say that this is like Rebbe, that once the get goes into the airspace of the chotzer, so it's like it landed in the chotzer, and therefore she's divorced. Amar lei, so Ula responds to Rabbi Abba, Afilu Temer Rabbanon, you can even say it's like the rabbis who argue on Rebbe, Adkando plige Rabbanon ole de Rebbe el linyan Shabbos. Look, the rabbis argue with Rebbe regard to the halachas of Shabbos. With regard to Rishus HaYachid, Rishus HaRabim, is it considered Otzah, Rishus LeRishus? Rebbe says yes, the Rabbanon say no. Aval Hacha, this has nothing to do with Otzah, Rishus LeRishus on Shabbos. Mishum Inturehu. This is purely about, is the get considered guarded in her possession? V'ha'kaminter. And here it is. The walls are tall enough. The get is not going to blow 3 blocks away. It's going to land in the courtyard. So at that point, it's already, she's going to be divorced because it's protected in her courtyard. So it has nothing to do with the machlokes between Rebbe and the Chacham with regard to Otzah Rishus L'Rishus on Shabbos. Is it considered guarded in the Chatzar or not? And here it is. And similarly says, that the outer walls are taller than the walls of the house. Amalei Reb Zera the Reb Asi Kiman Ki Rebbe. So Reb Zera asked Reb Asi, so is this like Rebbe who says that once something goes into the airspace, it's like it landed there? Amalei Afilu Temer Rabbanon. So Reb Asi responds, no, you can even say it's like the rabbis. Adkan lo pligi Rabbanon ole de Rebbe el linyan Shabbos. The rabbis only argue with Rebbe by Otzah Rishus L'Rishus on Shabbos. Avalachim mishum miturehu v'alkom minter. But over here it's about being guarded, and here it's guarded within the walls. Nimchok. So the Mishnah had said that if the husband is on the roof and he throws the get off the roof into the chotzer, so then once it's on its way down to the chotzer, it's off the roof on its way down to the chotzer, so even if it somehow gets erased on the way down, she's already divorced. Amar Rav Nachman, that's only if it gets erased on the way down. But if it got erased on the way up, then no. My time may Carlo because it was never going to land in a proper state. What is it? What's up and down? Who could tell me? Up and down is assuming that on the roof there's a fence around it, and therefore if you have the husband on the roof and he's throwing the get off of the roof into the chutzner, and there's a fence around the roof, so he's going to have to throw it over the fence. It's going to go up and then down. So we're saying if it gets erased, once it's already crossed over the fence to then descend into the courtyard, and on its way down it gets erased, then that is fine, if at that point it gets erased. But if it had gotten erased before it made its way over the fence, well then they are not divorced, because by the time it got into the avir of the chutzner, it was already not a kosher get. So let's read that again. It's only okay if the get gets erased on the way down to the courtyard after it has already cleared the fence. But if it gets erased while he's throwing it over the fence surrounding the roof and it hasn't yet cleared the fence, then they would not be divorced. My time I'll come because it was never at any point going to land in the chutzner in a proper state. Nisraf, if the get got burned on the way down, a fire suddenly broke out while the get was descending to the courtyard. That's only if the get was on its way down before the fire appeared. But if there was already a fire at the time that he threw it over the fence into the courtyard, lo, well then it would not be a kosher get. My time alcohol may occur the sefer causal because at every point, right? There was no point when it was going to land in a protected and acceptable manner, right? From the beginning, from the outset, once it was on its way down, it was memela going to get burned, and therefore it's not acceptable. Rav Chizda says, Rav Chizda, Reshuyas chalukis begittin. Says Rav Chizda that there are different reshuyas when it comes to gittin. Meaning, we've talked about, right, already today, we've mentioned a house, we've mentioned a courtyard, we've mentioned a roof. Those are considered different areas. And therefore, if the husband owns the courtyard and he lends an area in the courtyard for his wife to receive her get, so he's only lent an area in the courtyard. That doesn't mean that he's lent an area in the house or the roof, right? These are considered different areas, separate areas. Omar lei Rami bar Chama l'Rave. Now says Rami bar Chama to Rave, Mina lei l'Sava ha. How does Rav Chizda know this? So I wonder. Okay, Sava literally just means the elder. I think the article didn't make a big deal out of it, but Rami bar Chama and Rava were both son-in-laws of Rav Chizda. So I wonder if calling him Sava has anything to do with that. But I'll call upon him. So how does Rav Chizda know that there are these different reshuyas? So Amalei, so Rav responds to Rami bar Chama Masnisni. Well, it's our Mishnah. What does our Mishnah say? If she was standing on top of the roof, and he throws to her the get, right? She's standing on top of the roof, and he throws to her the get. Once the get reaches the air space of the roof, she's immediately divorced. And what's it talking about? Who owns the roof? Who owns the chotzer? If we're talking about where it's she owns the roof and she owns the courtyard, why do I need to wait until the get reaches the airspace of the roof? If she owns the chotzer already, by the time the get is in the chotzer, before it's thrown on the roof, she's already divorced. So if we say that it's his roof and his courtyard, well, even when the get reaches the roof, what difference does it make? It's his roof. She's not received, right? It's not hers. It's his roof. So how could she be divorced when it reaches the roof? Okay, so it must be then that we're talking about, well, it's her roof and his chotzer, and he throws the get from his chotzer onto her roof. Once it reaches the airspace of her roof, she's divorced. But Ema Seifa. But if we're talking about where it's his chotzer and her roof, then how do we understand the last part of the Mishnah? That if he's on the roof and she's in the chotzer, so it sounds like he's on her roof and she's in his chotzer, and he throws her the get. Once it leaves the roof and it's on its way down to the chotzer, at that point, she's already divorced. Even if it gets erased or burnt at that point, it doesn't matter. And if it's talking about where it's her roof and his courtyard, why is she divorced when he throws it into his own courtyard? So Ella rather must be talking about, therefore, where it's so and if we say it's talking about, so rather it must be talking about where it's his roof and her chotzer. And he's throwing it from his roof into her chotzer, and then once it goes, into the airspace of her chotzer, she's divorced. But that means that Reisha begag didah, v'chotzer didei. So then that means that the Reisha where she's on the roof is talking about where it's her roof and his chotzer. Sefer begag didei v'chotzer didah, and the Sefer where he's on the roof is talking about where it's his roof and her chotzer. But I don't know, the Reisha and the Sefer are talking about two separate things. No, so elalab. So rather, if we want to say that the Reisha and the Sefer are talking about the same thing, the oshla makom, it must be talking about where both the chotzer and the roof are, both the courtyard and the roof belong to him, and he lent her space to be able to receive the get there, and and people only lend out one area, not two areas, right? If he lent her an area on the roof to receive the get, that's only the roof, it's not the chotzer. And if you enter an area in the chotzer, it's only the chotzer, not the roof. So it's talking about where both the chotzer and the roof belong to him, but he lent her a place to receive the get. And that is how we know that the areas are considered separate when it comes to the get. Amarle, to which Rabbi Bar Chama says, I'm not convinced. Midi area dilma akadisa v'akadisa. No, maybe you could say, maybe you can say that the Reisha is talking about, right, Reisha begag dida v'chotzer didei, that the Reisha is talking about where it's her roof and his chotzer, Sefer begag didei v'chotzer dida, and the Sefer is talking about where the roof belongs to him and the chotzer belongs to her. But there's no implications for if when if these separate areas are considered, if these areas are considered separate for Gittin or not. Maybe that if he lends her a place in the chotzer, maybe she can also have a place on the roof. Right? There's no proof for that. Amar Rava Shalosh Midas Begittin. Rava says that there are 3 halachas that are specific to Gittin but not to other places. Ha the Amar Rebbe Kluta Kamisha Unacha. That when Rebbe says, as we saw earlier by Masechta Shabbos, that once an object goes into the airspace, it's considered like it landed there. Uflige Rabbanon Ole, and the rabbis argue on him, Hanemila Linyan Shabbos, that's only by Shabbos. Aval Hocha, but over here by the get, once he throws it off the roof and it goes into the airspace of her chotzer, Mishum Intureu, it's about being protected, nothing to do with Hotzah, Merishus L'Rishus, Ve'amintor, and it's protected because we said that the walls of the chotzer are taller than the house. V'hadar Amar Rav Chizda, now which Rav Chizda says on Shabbos, no, it's Kana B'Rishus HaYachid Uvrosho Traskel. So if you have a Rishus HaYachid and you you stick a pole into the ground in the Rishus HaYachid, and at the top of the pole there's some kind of a tray, and the pole is tall, right? It's taller than the Rishus HaYachid, it's taller than 10 Tfachim tall. Now if it was Rishus HaRabim, as we know, 10 Tfachim above the Rishus HaRabim is a Makom P'tur. It's no longer considered Rishus HaRabim. But Rishus HaYachid, Ola L'Rakia. Rishus HaYachid goes all the way up to the heavens. And therefore you have this very tall pole that's in Rishus HaYachid with a tray on top. That's still considered the Rishus HaYachid. V'zarek v'nochal gabav, and if you throw something from Rishus HaRabim and it lands on top of the tray, on top of the pole, which is above 10 Tfachim, afilu gavoa mea amma, even if it's 100 amas tall, chayev, you would be chayev for otzah Rishus L'Rishus, from throwing from Rishus HaRabim to Rishus HaYachid, Lefisha Rishus HaYachid Ola L'Rakia, because the Rishus HaYachid goes all the way up. But Hani Milei Leinin Shabbos. That's for Hotzah Rishus L'Rishus on Shabbos Aval Hocha. But over here, Mishum Inturehu V'alo Mintur. But by get, it would only be considered that she's received it if it's protected. But in this case, where you have a really tall pole with a little tray on top, and he throws the get and it lands on top of there, the wind can still blow it 3 blocks away, so it's not considered protected. So therefore, even though on Shabbos it would be considered Hotzah Merishus L'Rishus, by a get it's not considered like it landed in her property, because it can just blow away. For the Amar of Yehuda Amar Shmuel, and that which Rav Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel, Lo Yamud Adam Begag Zev Yiklot Megisham Begago Shel Chaver. On Shabbos, you shouldn't stand, right? Because of course you know about Eruv Chatzeris, right? If you want to go from one house to another, you have to make an Eruv in the Chotzer. So over here, if they didn't make an Eruv, and you're standing on your roof, and your friend's roof is mamish right next to yours, and there's water on your friend's roof, Lo Yamod Adam Begag Zeh, a fellow should not stand on his own roof, V'yiklot Megishamim, and gather water, rainwater, Migago Shel Chavero, from his friend's roof. From his friend's roof. That just like the houses are separate below, the same thing applies to the roofs, that they're considered separate, and you can't take water from your friend's roof into your roof without an Eruv Chatzeris. In Shabbos, but they're only considered separate with regard to Shabbos. But in terms of a get, if a husband says that you can receive the get on my roof, and he's got another roof that's right next to it, so she can also receive it on the other roof, because they're both roofs, and even though by Shabbos they're considered separate, but by get we say if he lends her space on this roof, then she can also accept the get on the other roof, right? Because when we say that the areas are considered separate, that's talking about a chotzer, a bayis, a gag, right? A courtyard, a house, a roof. But 2 roofs, the guy doesn't really care which roof she receives the get on. Omer Abaye says, if you have 2 chotzers, okay, shtickle ervin over here, shtickle ervin. You have 2 chotzers, one is inside of the other. I don't know, think about a chotzer that's, 20 feet by 20 feet, and surrounding it is another chotzer that's 40 feet by 40 feet. So the smaller chotzer is inside of the outer chotzer, of the bigger chotzer, and the walls of the bigger chotzer are taller than the walls of the inner chotzer. Right, the walls of the outer chotzer are taller than those of the inner chotzer. So again, Amar Abai says Abai, Shtei chatzeris, you have two chotzers, zolif nemizo, one more inward than the other. Pnimis shelo v'chitzona shelo. The inner chotzer is hers, the outer chotzer is his. Umchitzos hachitzonos odfis al pnimios, and the outer walls are taller than the inner walls. Uzrak ola, and he throws her the get. Kem chegia la'avir mechitzos hachitzono. Once the get arrives at the airspace of the outer chotzer that belongs to him, harezo migoreshes, she's already divorced at that point. My time I'll come pnimis gufa b'mechitzas achitzono kamintra. Interesting. So apparently, because the walls of the outer chotzer are taller than the inner chotzer, so the walls of the outer chotzer serve to kind of protect the inner chotzer, and therefore, since they're like servicing the inner chotzer in some way, they're considered like meshubah to the inner chotzer, and once the get gets into the airspace of the outer chotzer, then because of the outer chotzer is in service of the inner chotzer, she's already divorced. Masha'enge bekupis, which would not be the same if you had two like boxes. Shtei kupis zo b'soch zo, you have two boxes, one is within the other. Pnimius shelo v'chitzona shelo, the inner box is hers, the outer box is his, v'zarkola, and he throws her the get, afilu igia le'ovir pnimis eino migoreshes, even if it reaches the airspace of not just the outer box, but even if it reaches the airspace of the inner box, her box, she's not divorced. My time outcome dehalo noch, because it didn't land inner box. V'chi noch ma'avi, but even if it did land, who cares? Kelyo shalokech b'shuz mochero. But right, we learned about this question yesterday, I think, about the vessel of the purchaser in the domain of the seller, right? Meaning her vessel is inside of his vessel that's outside of it. Well, here we're talking about where the box doesn't have a base; it's just on the ground. So when it lands, it actually lands on the ground within her. Kind of the ground where her box is, so therefore she's divorced. Friends, no, we're not done yet. We have another small Mishnah. Beishamai says the Mishnah, Poter Adam Ishto beget Yoshin, that a fellow can divorce his wife with a get Yoshin. We'll explain what that is in a second. Beisil Osun. Beisil says you can't use a get Yoshin. Beisu get Yoshin. What's a get Yoshin? We've seen this before. If they had yichud after he wrote it, right? So if a fellow writes a get for his wife but doesn't give it to her, and then they remain together, whatever it was, they figured out their differences and they stayed together. 3 years later, they get divorced. In the meantime, they had kids. So Beishamai says, look, it's still a kosher get. You can use it. Look, you wrote it three years previous, but it's a kosher get. He never gave it to her. He can give it to her now. Beis Hillel says no, he can't use it anymore. So again, let's read the Mishnah again. Beishamai poter adam ishto beget yoshin. Beishamai says you can use an old divorce document that you wrote a while ago. Beis Hillel osun, but Beis Hillel says you cannot. Ve'ezu get yoshin. What's a get? What's an old get? Kol shenisyachid imo me'achashik savula. If they had yichud, if they were alone together after the get was written. But my kamifke, what's the machlokas between Beishamai and Beis Hillel? Why does Beishamai say it's okay? Beis Hillel says it's not. Beishamai Savrei Lo Amrinan Gezer Shem Yomu Gita Kodem Livno. Well, we're not concerned that the Yentis are going to say that she was divorced before she had her children, right? So if he wrote for her this document that they're going to get divorced, and then they ended up staying together for another 3 years, he never gave her the divorce. That could be 3 years, 5 years, whatever it is, right? So he wrote the get, but he never gave it to her. Now on the get is the date that it's written, and he never gave it to her. They ended up staying married together. In the meantime, they had kids, which is totally cool. It's totally fine. They never got divorced. They had kids together. But then eventually they got divorced. And then, some of the Yentis in the bungalow colony, Shabbos afternoon, they went into the bungalow to get the Diet Coke and the low-fat malno bread, and there they see the get. And they're looking, and they look at the date. And they say, wait a second. We know when they got divorced. We're the Yentis. We know these things. They got divorced just recently. At least so we thought. But look at the date over here. The date is from 3 years ago. But they have kids. Oh, the Yentis are shocked. The Yentis are shocked. The Yentis are shocked. They've been divorced all this time, which means that she had kids when she wasn't married to him. You think that they have what to talk about for Shabbos afternoon? They have what to talk about for the whole week at least, until the next Shabbos afternoon. So Beis Shammai says, look, we're not too concerned about the Yentis. So Beis Shammai says, Beis Shammai says, we're not concerned that the Yentis are going to say that if the Yentis find the get and see that the date is earlier, we're not concerned that it's going to lead to a situation where they're going to say that she was divorced before she had her children. Basil says, look, we're practical people over here. We're realists. The Yentis, if they find this get, you bet they're going to think that she had kids after she was already divorced. Amar Baba, Amar Shmuel, says Baba in the name of Shmuel, Im niseis lo teitze. But look, if she ends up getting remarried using this get, it's fine. It's a kosher get, technically speaking, and it's fine. V'amar vikadam, those say Amar Reb Abba, Amar Shmuel, Im nizgasha tinosi lichatchila. There are those who say that says Reb Abba in the name of Shmuel that if she got divorced with this document, with this get, she can even get remarried lichatchila. Right? Rashi says v'alach bailam dinas hayom tinosi lichatchila. For example, it doesn't sound like it's lichatchila to use the get yoshan, but if you did get married with the get yoshan, and then the husband is away and he's nowhere to be found to give another get, well then it's totally fine. You can get remarried, based on the fact that you got divorced with this document. Friends, that was Daf Ayin Tes of Masechta Gittin. We learned about if she's on the roof and he's in the chotzer, she's on the roof, that kind of stuff. You can throw it to her. She's divorced. Then we learned about the concept at the end of get yoshan, which is interesting, right? An outdated get, so to speak, right? You write the get, and then they have yichud after that. So Beis Shammai says it's still okay. Beis Hillel says that it's not good because of the yentis. Friends, that was Daf Ayin Tes of Masechta Gittin. I'll catch you all tomorrow for Daf Pei Masechta Gittin.